To add a pop on OZmap, you need to click on that first icon on the left-hand side under Network Expansion, and the last option will be to add a pop. Then you select the place on the map where it is located. And here in this new window, you need to enter some characteristics. For example, its name. The system will already indicate one. You can also add a tag, enter the implementation status of your pop, which can be in project, not implanted, implanted and certified implanted, and also enter any observations. I'll click on confirm and it will appear here. When you open your pop, it will have this blank page here. If you click on this little arrow on the side, all the elements within your pop will appear here, and here, on the right-hand side, the elements you select to work on at any given time will appear. So, the first step will be to add a shelf to my pop. To do this, I'm going to come up here, under New Shelf, and I'm going to add a name and a tag, if I wish, for this shelf of mine. I'll hit Save, and it will appear here on the side. Then, the next step will be to add an OLT inside this shelf. To do this, you can click on this plus here on the side, on New Equipment, or also, as my shelf is already added here in this editing menu, I can come up here, on New Equipment. So, here you need to enter a type of equipment. In my case, it's going to be an OLT. Here, you need to enter the type of OLT or whatever element you're using. These types are all adjustable in the OZmap settings. I'm going to enter a 1-slot OLT with 4 PON ports, a name for it, and also a tag. And down here, you also have the option of entering information about your physical equipment. I'll hit Save. And it will appear here, and also next door, in my shelf. The next element I'm going to add is a DIO, so I'm going to come back here to my shelf, type of equipment, DIO. It's going to be a 12-port DIO, the name is going to be DIO1, and I'm going to save it. So these 2 elements of mine will already be here in my shelf. I can expand them, and the information will appear. And I can also configure them here in the element itself, so I can add more slots, my OLT, I can also edit my equipment. Here in my slot, I can add more ports. Here in my DIO, I can add more trays. I can also edit it. I can change the information on this tray of mine. I can change the order of it here in my DIO, and I can also change the name of my DIO sides. For the system, it doesn't matter which one you use to be your output side or your input side. So, you can come here to edit and put, for example, input. And here on my B side, I can put output. The next element I'm going to add inside my pop is going to be a cable. So I'm going to come here to Network Expansion, add a cable, and I'm going to run a cable from my OLT to my CE. So, here in this window, I'm going to enter some settings for my cable, such as the type of cable, which is going to be 1 loose and 12 fibers, primary level, I can put in some tags, and also an implementation status. I'll generate my cable. And when I open my pop, my cable will already be in here. So that I can use it here in my settings menu, I can come here and use the cable. Then from there, I'll make my connections. Now, as I make my connections, and depending on the elements I want to use at the time of my connection, I can choose which of them will appear here on the side. So, for example, I'm first going to make my connections between my OLT and my DIO. So, my cable, I can come here to this option and hide all the cables, and it will be minimized here on the side. That makes loading this pop faster. So, I'm going to come here and hide the sidebar, and I'll make my connections. Now, there are 2 options. I can make my connections one by clicking on this plus and the next plus as well. So, I'm going to connect this port, one of my slot, one of my OLT1 here to my DIO, tray 1, input, and port 1. As I make these connections, the information about the equipment that is connected will appear. Another way of making these connections is to make them multiple times. So, I can come here in multiple connection, select the first port I want, the last port I want, and down here in the next element, just the first one. And all my connections are made automatically. Once I've made my connections between my OLT and my DIO, I'm going to expand here. I'm going to hide my OLT. In other words, I'm going to take it out of my menu here by coming here to hide equipment. And here in my cable, I'm going to click on the option to use cable. It will load here. So now I'm going to make my connections from the output side of my DIO to my cable using the multiple connections. If you want to undo these connections, you can click on any of the ports and disconnect, or also disconnect using the multiple disconnections option above. Finally, a tip is to use tags to identify which port feeds what. This can be done both here on your DIO and on your OLT. Right-click on a port and go to Properties. And here you'll see the tag field. So you can enter it here, for example, Neighborhood Center, and save. And it will appear here on the side. OLT1, slot 1, is door 1 and the tag on the side. So the way you close your POP will define the way it will be opened the next time. If I have my OLT and my DIO like this in my POP, the next time I come here and open it again, those are my two elements that will already be loaded here.